I'm Sadie, 29, parked in my old pickup outside my childhood home in Georgia. It's Christmas, and my family's laughter spills through the frosted windows. I'm shivering, clutching a thermos, staring at a chipped star ornament, the only thing I have left from Dad. His will gave me nothing, no money, no love, just their mockery. Now I own a house, and they're knocking, wanting it for my brother. I built it from pain. What would you do if your family turned their backs? Hit like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and coffee, the kind of place where big decisions got made without you. I was 27, sitting on a creaky chair, in a borrowed blazer, my hands sweaty. My brother Lucas slouched across from me, picking at his nails. Harper. My sister scrolled her phone, her earrings glinting under the fluorescent lights. Stepmom Diane sat rigid, her purse clutched like a shield. We were there for Dad's will 2 months after his funeral. I kept picturing his laugh, how he'd promised to always look out for me. The lawyer, a balding guy named Mr. Perry, cleared his throat and started reading. My stomach twisted with hope. Maybe I'd get his old watch, the one with the scratched face he wore fishing, or a little cash to fix my truck's radiator. Lucas shifted, smirking like he knew something I didn't. Mr. Perry's voice droned on, listing assets. The house went to Lucas. Harper got a chunk of savings. Diane got the lakefront lot Dad loved. I waited, my heart thumping. Then nothing. My name wasn't there. Mr. Perry flipped the page, moved on to some charity donation. I blinked, my mouth dry. Wait, I said, my voice small. What about me? The room went quiet. Lucas chuckled, a low, mean sound. Guess Dad knew you'd waste it, Sadie. Harper snorted, not even looking up from her phone. Diane stared at the floor, her lips tight. I felt heat crawl up my neck. There's gotta be a mistake, I said, leaning forward. Mr. Perry adjusted his glasses. No mistake, Ms. Coleman. Your father's wishes are clear. I searched his face for pity, but he just shuffled papers. My mind spun. Dad used to call me his little fighter. We'd sit on the porch splitting peanut butter sandwiches, talking about my dreams. Had that been a lie? Lucas stood, stretching like he'd won a prize. I noticed Dad's fishing rod leaning against his chair, the one I'd planned to take to the river, to feel Dad's hands guiding mine. You keeping that? I asked, pointing. Lucas grinned. Yep, part of my share. Harper finally looked up, her eyes sharp. Don't make a scene, Sadie. It's done. I wanted to scream, to demand why Dad erased me. Instead, I grabbed my bag, my chair scraping loud against the floor. As I reached the door, Harper's whisper cut through. She's always been the screw-up. My chest burned, but I didn't turn back. Outside, the July air was thick, pressing against my skin. I climbed into my truck, the engine sputtering like it felt my shame. My phone buzzed. Tessa, my coworker from the diner, texting. You okay? I didn't reply. I just drove the lawyer's words looping in my head. Nothing. I got nothing. The diner was a blur of clinking plates and grease-scented air. I stood behind the counter, wiping the same spot for the third time, my apron stained with ketchup. It was a week after the will reading, and my head was still a mess. I kept seeing Lucas's smirk, Harper's sneer, Diane's silence. Every night, I parked my truck at a rest stop, the vinyl seat my bed, my breath fogging the windows. I was 27, and my life felt like a bad joke. Tessa slung a tray of burgers past me, her braid swinging. Sadie, you look like you're gonna snap that rag in half, she said, eyeing me. I forced a smile, but my hands shook. Just tired, I mumbled. She didn't buy it. Tessa had this way of seeing through me, like she knew I was drowning, but too stubborn to grab the rope. A customer waved for coffee, and I poured it, my mind elsewhere. Dad's voice echoed, telling me I'd always have a home. Had he changed his mind? Did he think I was a failure? I'd dropped out of college to care for him when he got sick, spent nights in his hospital room while Lucas partied, and Harper planned her wedding. I thought that meant something. The bell above the door jingled. My heart sank. Lucas walked in his boots loud on the tile. He slid into a booth, not looking at me. I gripped the coffee pot tighter, debating whether to ignore him. But the diner was my turf. I walked over, my voice flat. "What do you want?" He leaned back, his eyes scanning the menu like he hadn't just gutted me days ago. "Just passing through. Thought I'd grab a bite." His tone was casual, like we were strangers. I stared, waiting for an apology, an explanation. Nothing. "Burger medium," he said, finally tossing the menu down. "You gonna say anything about the will?" I asked, my voice low. He sighed, like I was the problem. "Sadie, let it go. Dad made his choice. You got a deal." I felt my throat tighten. "Deal? You got everything, I got nothing." He shrugged. "Not my fault you didn't step up." "Step up?" I'd bathed Dad, fed him, read him his favorite westerns when he couldn't hold a book. I wanted to scream it, but the words stuck. Instead, I turned away, my eyes stinging. Tessa caught my arm as I passed. "Don't let him get to you," she whispered. But he already had. Back at the counter, I overheard two regulars, old guys in trucker hats, talking about their kids. One said, "My daughter's my pride even when she messes up." The words hit like a punch. Why wasn't I Dad's pride? I fumbled a plate and it clattered loud enough to turn heads. Tessa covered for me, but I felt exposed, like everyone could see my shame. After my shift, I sat in my truck, the engine off. My phone buzzed again. Tessa's text. "Crash at my place. You don't gotta do this alone." I stared at it, my pride like a wall. I typed, "I'm fine," and deleted it. The truth was, I wasn't fine. I was broke, homeless, and my family had written me off. But Lucas's words kept looping. "You didn't step up." I started the engine, the rumble loud in the dark. I wasn't done fighting. I'd save every tip, every dime, and show them I didn't need their pity. But as I pulled onto the highway, my chest ached with a question I couldn't shake. Why did Dad think I wasn't worth anything? Winter hit hard, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and stays. I was still in my truck, parked at a rest stop off the highway, a blanket draped over my shoulders. The diner's neon sign flickered in the distance as I counted my tips, nickels and dimes scattered on the passenger seat. 6 months since the will, and I was scraping by, pouring coffee and dodging questions about why I looked so tired. "My name's Sadie, 27, and I was learning how fast a family can forget you." I'd been avoiding the old house, but I needed my winter coat, the one Dad bought me when I was 16, navy blue with a ripped pocket. I figured Lucas wouldn't care if I grabbed it. I drove over the streets slick with ice, my breath catching as the familiar mailbox came into view. The porch light was on, glowing like it used to when Dad waited up for me. I knocked, my knuckles stinging in the chill. Lucas opened the door, his flannel shirt untucked, a beer in hand. "What do you want, Sadie?" he said, not moving aside. I swallowed, keeping my voice steady. "Just my coat. It's in the hall closet." He raised an eyebrow, then stepped back, leaving the door half open. The house smelled like pine and roasted chicken, a warmth I wasn't part of anymore. I spotted my coat folded on a shelf and reached for it. "Hold up," Lucas said, shutting the closet door before I could grab it. "We donated your stuff. Thought you didn't need it living the free life." He smirked like it was a joke. My stomach dropped. "You what I said?" My voice sharper than I meant. He shrugged. "Clara's idea. Said it was clutter." Clara. His wife was in the kitchen, her back to us, stirring something on the stove. She didn't turn around. "That was mine," I said, my hands balling into fists. "You had no right." Lucas took a swig of his beer, unbothered. "You left it here. Not my job to store your junk." I wanted to shove past him to tear the closet apart, but I saw Harper's purse on the couch, her laugh echoing from the dining room. They were all here living in Dad's house while I froze in my truck. I stepped closer, my voice low. You got everything, Lucas. The house Dad's rod his money. And you couldn't leave me one coat. He laughed a short, ugly sound. Don't start with the sob story. You're not entitled to anything. Clara glanced over her eyes, flickering with something, maybe guilt, but she stayed quiet. I felt my throat burn, the weight of his words pressing down. I turned to leave my boots heavy on the hardwood. As I reached the door, I heard Harper's voice from the dining room, loud and sharp. Is that Sadie? Tell her to stop begging? My face flushed, and I froze, one hand on the knob. Begging, I'd asked for what was mine. I wanted to storm in to scream that I'd cared for Dad while they did nothing but my legs wouldn't move. Outside, the cold slapped me hard. I climbed into my truck, my breath shaky. My phone lit up with a notification. Harper's social media, a photo of them all at the dining table, smiling, captioned, "Blessed with the best." I zoomed in, my heart twisting. I was there in the corner of the frame, my face half cut off like I'd been erased. The likes piled up, friends commenting, "Perfect family." I slammed the phone down, my chest tight with rage. They weren't just taking Dad's things, they were taking me piece by piece. I drove back to the rest stop, my hands shaking on the wheel. The photo of them all, smiles burned in my mind, my half face sliced out like I was nothing. I parked under a flickering streetlight, the cold creeping through the truck's cracked windows. My name's Sadie, 27, and I was starting to feel like a ghost in my own life. I pulled my thin blanket tighter, trying to shake the image of Harper's caption, "Blessed," like I'd never existed. The next morning, I was back at the diner, my eyes gritty from no sleep. The breakfast rush was brutal, plates clattering, orders shouted over the sizzle of bacon. I moved on autopilot, refilling coffee, forcing smiles. Tessa nudged me at the counter, her voice low. "You look rough. Want to talk?" I shook my head, wiping down a sticky syrup bottle. Talking wouldn't undo what they'd done. Mid-shift, my phone buzzed in my apron, a voicemail from Diane. My stepmom hadn't spoken to me since the will, reading her silence louder than Lucas's taunts. I slipped into the break room, a cramped space with a wobbly table, and played it. Her voice was clipped, businesslike. "Sadie, we need to discuss the plot of land by the creek. Your father mentioned it for you, but it's in my name now. Sign it over. It's the right thing." She didn't say please. She didn't say sorry. I stood there, the phone heavy in my hand. That plot wasn't much, just a scrubby patch where Dad and I used to skip rocks, dreaming up plans for a cabin. He'd said it was mine one day, a place to build something of my own. Now Diane wanted it like she hadn't taken enough. I deleted the voicemail, my chest tight, but her words looped in my head. The right thing. For who? Back on the floor. I fumbled an order, mixing up pancakes for waffles. A customer, a guy with a loud laugh, snapped, "Get it together, sweetheart." I mumbled an apology, my face hot. Tessa caught my eye, but I looked away. I didn't want her pity. At the counter, Greg, a regular with a gray beard and kind eyes, sipped his coffee. He'd been coming in forever, always leaving a big tip. "Rough day, Sadie?" he asked, his voice gentle. I shrugged, stacking plates. "Just family stuff." He nodded like he understood. "Families can cut deeper than anyone. Don't let 'em break you." His words stuck, but they didn't ease the ache. I wanted to tell him how Diane's call felt like a knife, how that land was all I had left of Dad's promises. But I just poured him more coffee, my hands unsteady. That night, I sat in my truck, the rest stop, quiet, except for the hum of semis. I dug through my glove box, looking for a pen, and found an old photo of me and Dad taken at that creek. I was 10, grinning, holding a flat stone. He was behind me, his hand on my shoulder, proud. I traced his face, my throat burning. Had he lied even then? I tucked the photo away, but the question clawed at me. My phone lit up again. Another post from Harper this time, a video of Lucas grilling in Dad's backyard, Diane laughing, Clara passing a salad. The caption read, "Family nights are the best." I watched it twice, my stomach churning. They were living my memories, stealing my place while I ate cold soup from a can. I threw the phone onto the seat, my breath ragged. They didn't just want Dad's things. They wanted me gone, erased, forgotten. And I was starting to believe I deserved it. Rain pelted my truck's windshield, blurring the world outside. It was spring, a year after Dad's will left me with nothing, and I was 28, still scraping by. My name's Sadie, and I'd been avoiding my family's house like a bruise you don't touch. But Tessa, my co-worker, convinced me to go to their barbecue, said maybe it was time to mend things. I wanted to believe her, to think Lucas, Harper, and Diane might see me as more than a failure. So I went. My stomach knotted, wearing my only clean dress. The backyard was packed, string lights swaying in the drizzle, the air thick with charcoal smoke. Neighbors laughed. Kids ran through puddles and country music hummed from a speaker. I stood by the gate, clutching a soda, feeling like an intruder. Lucas manned the grill, flipping burgers, his laugh loud. Harper passed out drinks, her hair perfect despite the rain. Diane sat at a picnic table, chatting with Clara, Lucas's wife. No one noticed me. I took a deep breath and walked over my sneakers, squishing in the wet grass. "Hey," I said, my voice barely audible over the chatter. Lucas glanced up, his smile fading. "Sadie, didn't expect you." Harper turned, her eyes narrowing, but she didn't speak. Diane gave a tight nod, then looked away. I stood there, the soda can cold in my hand, waiting for something, anything, to feel like family. Lucas wiped his hands on a towel and stepped closer. "What's this about? You need money or something?" His tone was sharp, like I was a beggar. I shook my head, my throat tight. "Just wanted to see everyone. Thought maybe we could talk." He snorted loud enough for heads to turn. "Talk? You got nothing to say, Sadie. This is our life now." I felt my face heat up, but I pressed on. "It's Dad's house, his legacy. You're just gonna act like I don't belong." My voice cracked, and I hated it. Harper stepped forward, her drink sloshing. "You don't. Dad made that clear." The words hit like a slap, but worse was the murmur from the crowd, neighbors whispering, their eyes on me. I wanted to disappear. Then Lucas raised his voice loud enough for everyone. "Big news, folks." He clapped his hands, drawing attention. "I'm selling this place. Got a buyer lined up. Time for a fresh start, new business, new life." Cheers erupted, glasses clinking. Harper whooped, hugging him. Diane smiled, her first real one all day. I stood frozen, rain dripping down my neck. Selling Dad's house. The one we'd painted together, where he'd taught me to whistle on the porch. I stepped forward, my voice shaking. "You can't sell it. It's all we have left of him." Lucas turned, his face hard. You got no claim, Sadie. You're nobody here." The crowd went quiet, the rain louder now. I looked at Harper, hoping for a shred of softness, but she just smirked. Diane stared at her hands. Clara, though, shifted uncomfortably, her eyes meeting mine for a split second. My chest burned, my breath short. "Nobody," I said louder than I meant. "I took care of him. I was there when he was dying." "Where were you?" Lucas laughed, a cruel barking sound. "Don't play the martyr. Dad knew you'd never amount to anything." I felt the ground tilt, my vision blurring. The truth was worse than I'd imagined, and it was coming sharp and unstoppable, ready to break me open. The rain soaked through my dress, my hair plastered to my face, but I couldn't move. Lucas's words echoed, nobody, like a hammer on glass. I was 28, standing in my family's backyard, surrounded by strangers who'd once been neighbors. My name's Sadie, and I was unraveling. The barbecue crowd watched, their whispers buzzing like flies. I looked at Harper, her arms crossed, her smirk sharper now. Diane picked at her napkin, avoiding my eyes. Clara's glance lingered, but she said nothing. Harper stepped closer, her voice loud, slicing through the rain's patter. "You want to know why Dad cut you out, Sadie?" he told us. "Said you needed a lesson. Said you'd never learn to stand on your own." She laughed, a high, cruel sound, and the crowd shifted, some nodding, like they agreed. My breath caught my heart pounding so hard I thought it burst. A lesson Dad had sat me down, promised I'd always be his girl. Had he planned this with them? I turned to Diane, my voice raw. "Is that true? Did he say that?" She hesitated, her fingers twisting the napkin, then nodded once, quick like it hurt. "He thought it'd make you stronger," she mumbled. Stronger, I'd spent years proving I was enough, holding his hand through chemo, cooking his favorite stew when he could barely eat. And he'd orchestrated this betrayal with them all in on it. Lucas clapped a hand on Harper's shoulder, grinning. "See, Sadie, we were just following Dad's wishes. You should thank us. Thank them for stealing my home, my memories, my worth." I felt my knees buckle, the soda can slipping from my hand, splashing into a puddle. A neighbor, Mrs. Tate, who'd known me since I was 6, looked away, her face tight with pity. The shame burned hotter than the cold. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. My mind flashed to Dad's last days, how I'd whispered I loved him, thinking he'd heard. Had he been plotting this, even then? Talking to Lucas and Harper behind my back? I saw Clara whisper to Lucas, her voice low. "You're going too far." He brushed her off, but her words were a faint spark in the dark, too small to hold on to. The crowd started moving again, grabbing plates, pretending I wasn't breaking apart. Harper turned away, her laugh floating back as she joined Lucas at the grill. Diane stood smoothing her skirt and walked inside without a glance. I was alone, the rain louder now, drowning out the music. My chest felt hollow, like everything I'd believed about Dad, about myself, had been ripped away. I stumbled toward the gate, my shoes sinking in the mud, my heart screaming one question: if I was nobody to them, who was I? The rain followed me home, or what passed for home, my truck parked at the rest stop, its windows fogged with my breath. I was 28, my name's Sadie, and the barbecue had shattered something in me. Lucas's words, Harper's laugh, Diane's confession about Dad's lesson looped in my head, each one a cut deeper than the last. I sat in the dark, my wet dress clinging to me, and for the first time, I didn't cry. I was done begging for a place in their world. Morning came gray and heavy. I drove to the diner, my hands steady on the wheel. Tessa was there, flipping pancakes, her eyes catching mine as I tied my apron. "You look different," she said, not prying. I nodded, not ready to explain. Different was right. I'd spent a year waiting for them to see me to fix what they broke. No more. I was going to build something they couldn't touch. After my shift, I met Tessa at a bank downtown, a brick building with 2 bright lights. She'd been pushing me to apply for a loan, saying I could afford a small house if I played it smart. I'd brushed her off before, too scared of failing, of proving Lucas right. But now, sitting across from a loan officer named Miss Carter, I felt a spark. She slid papers toward me, explaining terms. "It's a fixer-upper, needs work, but it's solid," she said. I signed my name, Sadie Coleman, each letter a promise to myself. The house was mine. I drove to see it, a little place on a quiet street, its paint-peeling windows grimy, but a porch that caught the sun. I walked inside, the floorboards creaking, and saw possibility. Tessa joined me, carrying a bucket of paint samples. "We're doing this," she said, grinning. We started that weekend, sanding walls, taping windows, the smell of fresh paint sharp in the air. My arms ached, but every stroke felt like claiming ground. I hung a small shelf in the living room, setting Dad's chipped star ornament on it. It wasn't his house, but it was his memory, mine to keep. At the diner, I started sketching ideas during breaks, not just for the house, but for something else. Dad used to love candles, the way they made evenings feel safe. I'd watched him light one every Sunday, saying it was for hope. I bought wax and wicks with my tips experimenting in the truck's tiny space, melting and pouring by flashlight. The first batch was lumpy, but the scent cedar and vanilla reminded me of him. I gave one to Tessa, who lit it and said, "Sadie, this is good. You could sell these." I wasn't sure, but her belief stuck. I made more, labeling them with my initials SC, and took a few to a local market. A woman bought one, then another, saying they felt personal. My heart raced, not just from the sale, but from the idea that I could create something real. For the first time in years, I felt like I was moving forward, not just surviving. Lucas and Harper didn't get to define me anymore. I was building a life, and it was mine. The market became my proving ground. Every Saturday, I set up a folding table, my candles lined up in rows, their wicks trimmed neat. I was 28, my name's Sadie, and each sale felt like a brick in the wall I was building around my heart. Customers lingered, asking about the scents, and I'd tell them about Dad, how he'd light a candle to chase away the dark. Their smiles, their cash, their stories, they were mine, not Lucas's, not Harper's, not Diane's. One afternoon, I saw Lucas at a coffee shop across town, his truck parked crooked outside. My first instinct was to duck to hide like I'd done for a year, but my house keys jingled in my pocket, heavy reel. I walked in, my chin up, and ordered a black coffee. Lucas sat at a corner table scrolling his phone, his jaw tight. I could have left, but something in me snapped taut, like a rope pulled to its limit. I walked over, my voice steady. "Lucas." He looked up, startled, then leaned back, his arms crossed. "What now?" "Sadie." Another sob story. I didn't flinch. "I don't need your pity. I got a house. I'm building a business. I'm done waiting for you to care." His eyes narrowed, and for a second I saw a flicker, maybe doubt, maybe fear. "Good for you," he said, but his voice was thin, like he didn't mean it. I didn't wait for more. I paid for my coffee and left my heart pounding, but not with anger. It was pride, sharp and clean. I'd faced him not as the sister he'd mocked, but as Sadie, who'd clawed her way up. Back at my house, I poured new candles, experimenting with lavender, a scent Dad never used, but one I loved. The wax cooled smooth, and I labeled each jar with a small tag, my handwriting bold. SC Candles, my mark. Tessa helped me set up an online shop, just a simple page with photos I took on my phone. Orders trickled in, then poured. A local boutique asked to stock them, and I said yes, my voice shaking with disbelief. Greg, the diner regular, stopped by with a check, a small investment for supplies. "You're doing something real, Sadie," he said, his eyes crinkling. I hugged him, something I hadn't done with anyone in years. One evening, I was sanding a kitchen cabinet when Clara, Lucas's wife, knocked on my door. She held one of my candles, the cedar one, her fingers tracing the label. "I bought this at the market," she said, her voice soft. "It's beautiful." I nodded, wary, but she didn't push. "I'm proud of you," she added, then left. Her words hung in the air, a quiet bridge I hadn't expected. I stood in my living room, the walls still half painted, and looked at Dad's star ornament on the shelf. It caught the light, chipped but whole. I lit a lavender candle, its flame steady, and sat on the floor, the wood cool under me. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I'd built it from nothing, and no one could take that away. I closed my eyes, the scent wrapping around me, and let myself breathe. Winter settled over my little house, the kind of cold that makes you crave soup and a fire. I was 28, my name's Sadie, and my life was finally mine. The paint on the walls was dry, my candles were selling, and I'd faced Lucas without crumbling. But the quiet of my new world felt fragile, like a glass you're afraid to bump. I stood in my kitchen stirring a pot of chili when the doorbell rang sharp and unexpected. My stomach tightened. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door to find Lucas Harper and Diane on my porch, their coats dusted with snow. Lucas's hands were in his pockets. Harper's arms crossed Diane's face, blank. No one spoke at first. I gripped the doorknob, my breath short. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice low. Lucas cleared his throat, forcing a smile. "Heard you got this place. Thought we'd see it." I didn't move. My housewarming party was tonight, a small thing with Tessa Gregg and a few neighbors. They weren't invited. Harper tilted her head, her eyes scanning the porch like she was appraising it. "Cute," she said, but her tone was cold. Diane stepped forward, her voice softer. "It's nice, Sadie. Really nice." I waited, knowing there was more. There always was. Lucas glanced at Harper, then back at me. "Look, this house, it's perfect. Big enough for a family. My kids need space, you know? We were thinking you could let us have it. For them." My jaw tightened. Have it? I'd poured every dime, every sleepless night into this place. I stared, waiting for the punchline, but his face was serious, expectant. Harper chimed in, her voice bright but sharp. "You don't need all this room, Sadie. You're alone. Lucas has a wife, kids. It makes sense." I felt my pulse in my throat, the chilly steam rising behind me. Alone. The word stung, but not like it used to. I looked at Diane, hoping for a hint of shame, but she just nodded, like this was reasonable. "It's what families do," she said. "We share." I wanted to laugh, to slam the door, but my feet stayed planted. "This is my home." I said each word deliberate. I earned it. Lucas's smile faded, his eyes hardening. Earned. "You think you're better than us now? You owe us, Sadie. After everything. Owe them for what? Their laughter, their theft, their erasure of me." The air felt thick, the snow falling heavier now. I heard footsteps inside Tessa, setting out plates for the party. Her laughter faint. My world, my people were here, not out there with them. Lucas took a step closer, his voice dropping. "Think about it. We could make this messy. Legal stuff. You don't want that." His threat hung there cold and real, like the frost on my windows. I stood still, my hand tight on the knob, their faces blurring in the porch light. They thought they could walk in, take what I'd built, like it was theirs to claim. The weight of their audacity pressed down, not anger, yet just a heavy, silent shock. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The moment froze, their eyes on me, waiting for me to break. The silence stretched heavy as the snow piling on my porch. I stood in the doorway. My name's Sadie, 28, facing Lucas Harper and Diane, their eyes boring into me like I was a puzzle they couldn't solve. My house, my life, they wanted it for Lucas's kids, as if I'd hand it over like a spare key. Tessa's voice drifted from the kitchen, calling for more napkins, but I couldn't move. Lucas's thread of legal stuff hung in the air, a blade held too close. Clara appeared behind them, her coat buttoned wrong, her face pale. She tugged at Lucas's sleeve, her voice low. "Let's go. This isn't right." He shook her off, his jaw tight, but her words cracked the moment like a stone through ice. I looked at her, really looked, and saw something new, shame. Not mine, hers. She met my eyes, then dropped hers to the snow. Harper shifted, her boots crunching. "Sadie, don't be selfish. You've got no one. This house could be a home for them." Her voice was softer now, almost pleading, but it cut deeper than her usual venom. No one. I felt the words settle in my bones, not as pain, but as truth I'd already faced. I looked at her, just held her gaze, until she looked away. Diane cleared her throat, stepping forward. We're not the bad guys here. We're family. Family. The word tasted like ash. I saw Greg inside, setting out mugs I'd painted their colors bright against the table. My family was in there, not out here. I opened my mouth to say it, but Lucas cut in, his voice sharp. You'll regret this, Sadie. We'll come back. I felt my pulse slow, my grip on the doorknob loosening. Then I'll call the police. I said, my voice calm, almost too calm. Lucas blinked, caught off guard. Harper's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Diane's hands twitched, clutching her purse tighter. Clara whispered, Lucas, please, but he ignored her, his face red. You wouldn't dare, he said, but his eyes flickered with doubt. I didn't blink. Try me. The words felt like stones, heavy but sure. I saw Tessa step into the hallway, her phone out, recording silently. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with a strange clarity. They'd come to take like always, but this time I wasn't bending. Lucas took a step back, his boots slipping in the snow. This isn't over, he muttered, turning away. Harper followed, her head down. Diane lingered, her lips parting, but she said nothing, just walked off. Clara stayed a moment longer, her eyes wet. I'm sorry, she said so quiet, I almost missed it. Then she was gone, her figure blurring into the storm. I closed the door, the lock clicking soft. Inside, the party hummed laughter and clinking glasses. But I stood still, the cold from the porch clinging to me. They'd come back, I knew it, but something in me had shifted like a door I'd never open again. I leaned against the wall, my breath shallow, and let the silence swallow me. Spring arrived soft, the air warm with new grass and blooming dogwoods. I was 29. My name's Sadie, and my house felt like a real home, now its walls holding my story. The night Lucas, Harper, and Diane tried to claim it lingered like a bruise, but I'd stood my ground, and that changed me. I sat in my backyard, a patch of dirt I'd turned into a garden, my hands in the soil, planting seeds Dad once said would grow strong. I'd bought a packet of marigold seeds from a hardware store, their bright orange, a color Dad loved. He'd sit with me as a kid, showing me how to press seeds just deep enough, promising they'd bloom if I was patient. I hadn't gardened since he died, but now, kneeling in the earth, I felt him close, not as the man who'd cut me out, but as the father who'd taught me to build. Each seed I planted was a choice, a way to root myself here. Tessa pulled up in her car, her laugh carrying, as she stepped out with a thermos of iced tea. You're turning into a farmer, she teased, sitting on a lawn chair. I grinned, wiping dirt on my jeans. Maybe. Feels good. She nodded, pouring us tea, and we sat quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't need filling. Tessa had been my anchor recording that night to protect me, and now she was more than a friend, she was family. I'd hired her to help with my candle business, which was growing faster than I'd dreamed. We'd rented a small workshop, just a shed behind a local shop, where we poured wax and packed orders. Customers left reviews online saying the candles felt like home, and I read each one, my heart full. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was creating something that mattered, something no one could take. Clara showed up later, her hair tied back, her eyes clearer than I'd ever seen. She'd left Lucas, moved into a tiny apartment, and was starting over. I don't know how you did it, she said, sitting beside me, her fingers tracing a marigold leaf. Built all this after everything. I shrugged, not sure how to explain. One step at a time, I guess. You'll get there too. She smiled, small but real, and I felt a warmth, like helping her was healing a part of me. We worked together, planting more seeds, the sun dipping low. Clara talked about her plans, a job she'd applied for, a life she wanted. I listened, my hands steady in the dirt, and realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at her, not even at Lucas, not really. I'd spent so long fighting their shadows, but now in this garden, I was free. The marigolds would bloom soon, and I'd be here to see it no matter what came next. The sun sank lower, painting the sky pink over my backyard. I was 29, my name's Sadie, and the garden was taking shape, marigolds just starting to peek through the soil. Clara had gone home. Her quiet hope lingering like a soft echo. I sat alone now, a trowel resting in my lap, the air cooling around me. The fight with Lucas Harper and Diane felt distant, like a storm that had passed, leaving only the memory of its roar. I walked to the shed, pulling out a box of old things I'd tucked away. Inside was a pair of Dad's gardening gloves, worn leather with frayed cuffs, the kind he'd worn to teach me about roots and patience. I slipped them on, too big for my hands, and smiled at the familiar weight. They smelled of earth and time, a piece of him I hadn't lost. I didn't need to know why he'd cut me out anymore. I'd built this life without his answers. My phone buzzed on the lawn chair, a letter from Harper forwarded by a neighbor who'd found it in her mailbox. I opened it, expecting venom, but the words were careful, almost soft. She wrote about wanting a fresh start. No apologies, just a plea to talk. I read it twice, my thumb tracing the paper's edge. A year ago, I'd have torn it up, my anger hot. Now I folded it neatly and set it aside. I didn't owe her a reply, not yet, maybe not ever. That choice was mine. Inside, I lit a new candle, one I'd made with sage, its scent sharp and clean. The flame danced, casting shadows on the walls I'd painted myself. I thought of Greg, who'd given me his diner contacts before retiring, his faith in me a gift. Tessa was planning a candle workshop for the neighborhood, her energy pulling me forward. They were my people, the ones who stayed when blood turned away. I stepped onto the porch, the gloves still on, and looked at the stars. Dad used to say they were stories, each one holding someone's truth. I didn't need his story to finish mine. I walked to the garden, kneeling by a small rose bush I'd planted last week, its leaves tender but strong. I pressed the soil gently, the gloves warm against my skin, and felt a quiet settle in me. This was my ground, my peace, and I was ready to keep growing. Summer wrapped my house in warmth, the kind that makes you open windows and let the breeze carry the day. I was 29, my name's Sadie, and 3 years had passed since Dad's will left me empty-handed. The marigolds in my garden bloomed bright, their orange petals a quiet victory. I sat on my porch, a mug of coffee in hand, the ceramic warm against my palms. My life wasn't loud or perfect, but it was mine, built from the ground up, and that was enough. I'd started a new habit, waking early to walk the neighborhood, my sneakers soft on the pavement. The streets were lined with old oaks, their branches heavy with leaves, and I'd nod to neighbors I now knew by name. There was Mr. Ellis, who always watered his roses, and Lena, who pushed her grandson's stroller. These small connections, these faces grounded me in a way I hadn't known I needed. I wasn't running from anything anymore. My candle business had grown steady, not a fortune, but a living. Tessa and I ran workshops now, teaching kids to pour wax, their laughter filling the shed. I'd watch them, their hands sticky with pride, and feel a lightness like I was giving them something I'd lost too young. Orders came from across the state, each package wrapped with care, my initials on every label. I'd hired a local teenager, Mia, to help with shipping, her chatter a bright spot in my days. Clara stopped by sometimes, her life taking shape in a new job at a bookstore. We'd sit in my kitchen, splitting a loaf of bread she'd baked, talking about small things, dreams, the weather. She never mentioned Lucas, and I didn't ask. He'd moved away, his business gone quiet, the house he'd sold a memory I didn't carry. Harper had called once, her voice hesitant, but I'd set a boundary, polite but firm. I wasn't ready for her, maybe never would be. One morning, a package arrived from Diane, a photo of Dad in a plain frame, his smile wide, the lake behind him. A note was tucked inside her handwriting, small. He was proud of you. I sat at my table, the photo in my hands, and felt my eyes sting. Proud? I'd never know if she meant it or if it was her guilt speaking. I set the frame on a shelf, not as an answer, but as a piece of a past I could hold without breaking. I walked to my garden, the coffee still warm in my mug, and knelt by the marigolds. Their scent was sharp alive, and I brushed my fingers over their petals, soft as a promise kept. I wasn't the girl who'd slept in her truck or the one who'd begged for a place at their table. I was Sadie here now, whole. The breeze stirred, carrying the sound of kids playing down the street, and I breathed deep, letting the moment settle. The evening light softened, casting long shadows across my porch. I was 29, my name's Sadie, and the weight of 3 years felt lighter now, like a coat I'd learned to carry. I stood by my front door, a small table set up for a community event. I'd planned candles glowing in glass jars, their sage and citrus scents mingling with the summer air. Neighbors milled around, their voices, warm plates of potluck pie in hand. This was my home, my people, my proof I'd survived. I'd spent the day preparing, stringing lights, stacking chairs, my hands steady with purpose. Mia, my teenage helper, had painted signs, her grin wide as she taped them up. Tessa arrived early, her arms full of lemons for homemade lemonade, her laughter pulling everyone closer. Clara was there too, passing out napkins, her quiet confidence new but sure. I watched them, my heart full, and realized how far I'd come from the truck, from the will, from the laughter that once broke me. Later, I slipped inside, needing a moment alone. I stood in my living room, the walls now lined with shelves I'd built, holding books, candles, a single photo of Dad. I'd found a notebook in a drawer, one I'd filled as a teenager, pages of dreams I'd shared with him, plans for a life I thought he'd see. I wrote in it now, a letter to him, my pen slow. I told him I'd made it not because of his lesson, but despite it. I folded the page, lit a match, and burned it in the sink, the smoke curling upward, my eyes dry. I didn't need his approval anymore. The event wound down, and I stepped outside, handing out candles to a local shelter, their director shaking my hand, her thanks sincere. I saw Clara talking to Mia, their heads close, both smiling, and felt a quiet pride. I'd built more than a house. I'd built a life that held others up. Lucas was gone. Harper silent. Diane, a memory. They'd taken what they could, but they couldn't take this, my strength, my peace. What I've learned is simple but hard-won: family isn't blood. It's the people who see you when you're invisible, who stay when you're at your lowest. Strength isn't winning or proving them wrong. It's choosing yourself every day, even when it hurts. I forgave Dad not for him, but for me to let go of the question that kept me small. You don't need their table when you can build your own, and that's where the real healing starts. So, I want to ask you, what's the moment you chose yourself, the one that set you free? Share it below. Let's hold space for each other's stories. If this moved you, please like, subscribe, or share it with someone who needs it. Thank you for being here, for listening, for carrying your own light. Here's to building our own tables, and may you find peace in every step.